this is the practice ACT for 2019-2020. So we are going to get started and just go through all 60 problems, and I'll try and give you some hints and helps or whatever that I know of on these. And just because I do it one way doesn't mean there's other ways to do it. You might find something easier or faster than what I'm doing. So number one, it says Marcus's favorite casserole recipe requires 3 eggs and makes 6 servings. So 3 eggs will make 6 servings. And it says Marcus will modify the recipe by using 5 eggs. So he wants to have 5 eggs and increasing all of the ingredients in the recipe proportionally. What is the total number of servings the modified recipe will make? So we want X servings. And this is just a simple proportion. Cross multiply and solve to get your answer. And so I'm going to have 3x equals 30, because 3 times x is 3x, and 6 times 5 is 30, and divide by 3, and you will get x is 10. And so my answer should have been C on that one for number 1. Number 2, it said, the 35-member History Club is meeting to choose a student government representative. The members decide that the representative, who will be chosen at random, cannot be any of the 3 officers of the club. So if it cannot be any of the 3 officers, we're really only going to choose from 32, because if you had 35 members and 3 of them were officers and we can't choose them, we only have 32 people that we get to choose from. What is the probability that Hiroko, who is a member of the club but not an officer, will be chosen? Well, there's presumably only 1 kid in the class named Hiroko, so it's 1 kid out of 32, or it should be the letter K. Okay, number 3. It says, for what value of x is the equation 2 to the 2x plus 7 equal 2 to the 15th true? You have to have the same base, and we do. They're both 2's. If you have the same base, then powers are equal to each other. So you'd have 2x plus 7 equals 15, and you would just solve it. And you would subtract 7 on both sides. I'm going to try and get it so the pen doesn't make as much noise. So if I, hang on, I'm going to get it so it will work. So it's 2x, we're going to write it again. Okay, so if we have 2x plus 7 equals 15 and we solve it, you would subtract 7 on both sides. That's really ugly. Subtract 7 and you would get 2x equals 8, or x is 4. And so my answer should have been the letter B, or 4. Number 4. Number 4 said, let the function f be defined as f of x equals 5x squared minus da da da. What is the value of f of 3? That just means you plug 3 in for all of your x's. And they're really testing, do you know, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally's or PEMDAS, do you know how to do it in the right order? And so you would have had 3 squared, which is 9, times 5 is 45, minus 7 times, and then do what's in this parenthesis. And you're going to have a 12 plus 3, which is 15. So you're going to have 45 minus 7 times 15, which is 105. And if we subtract those, you should get something like negative 60. So my answer should have been the letter J, negative 60. Number 5. Number 5, it says a wallet containing 5 $5 bills. So we have 5 that are $5 bills, 7 that are $10 bills, and 8 that are $20 bills is found and returned to its owner. The wallet owner will reward the founder with 1 bill drawn randomly from the wallet. So you have to say how many bills are in the wallet. We have 8 plus 5, which is 13, plus 7, which is 20. So there's 20 bills in the wallet. That's if I added those numbers right there, 8, 5, and 7. You should get $20 in the bill, and it says, what is the probability that the bill drawn will be a $20 bill? Where there were 8 $20 bills in the wallet, so it's 8 out of 20. But then you need to reduce it. 4 will go into both of those, and you will get 2 out of 5, because 4 will go into 8 twice, and 4 will go into 5 20 times, or 2/5. And so my answer should have been D as in doggy. Number 6. The ABC Book Club charges a $40 monthly fee plus $2 per book. So I would write ABC Book Club. And they charge $40 for the monthly fee plus $2 for every book. And I'm just going to use X as books. So if I said X is my number of books, I'm going to be charged $2 for every book I buy. The Easy Book Club, so now I've got another one, which was Easy Book Club, and they charge $35 monthly fee plus $3 a book, so 3x read in that month. For each club, how many books must be read in 1 month for the total charges for each club to be equal? So all they want to know is when is the bottom one equal to the top, those two equations equal to each other. So it's 40 plus 2x is going to equal the 35 plus 3x. And so if I solve that, you're going to subtract 2x to the other side. That will give us x, and subtract the 35 over here, and you're going to get 5, or we would have to read 5 books every month to pay the exact same price, whether we were part of the Easy Book Club or the ABC Book Club. So on number 6, my answer should have been H. Number 7. It says in parallelogram ABCD below, AC is a diagonal. The measure of angle ABC is 40, and they even wrote it in your picture, so it's easy. And the measure of ACD is 57. They also drew that in your picture. And they asked, what is the measure of CAD? So if I have parallel lines, they told you that this is a parallelogram. Parallelogram means the lines are parallel. So I'm going to draw this line and say they're parallel. And I have a transversal that's cutting right up here. So my question would be, what are these two angles called in a parallelogram? So again, if it's too much confusing on that picture, those two angles right there, what do we call them? And we call those same side interior angles. And same side interior angles, they are not equal, they are supplementary, which means same side interior angles, they add to 180 degrees. So if I need to add those to 180 degrees, I'm going to find this angle right here that I'm going to call X. So I would have had 40 plus X plus 57 had to equal 180. And that's going to give me that angle X. So I would have the 40 plus 57 is 97 equals 180. And if I subtract those, I'm going to get 83 for that little X. So I know this angle right here, this green thing I'm writing right there is 83 degrees. So now you're in a parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel. So now if I look at my other parallel lines, so this one, and it's transversal, what are these two angles called? So again, if I try and draw that over here, that without all the confusion, you've got an angle right here that said it was 83, and we were asked to find that angle right there. Those are alternate interior angles, alternate interior because they're inside, and alternate interior angles are equal, and so it has to be the 83 degrees to get that angle down there, which is the letter D. Number 8. We good on this one, I hope, people? Number 8 says when x is a half, what is the value of this? So we just plug it in. 8 times 1/2 minus 3 divided by 1/2. 8 times a half is 4, so if we have 4, I didn't write a half down there, divided by a half. 8 times a half is 4 minus 3 divided by a half. Well, 4 minus 3 is 1 divided by a half. If we go back and remember our math from a long time ago when we learned fractions, 1 divided by a half, when we divide fractions, your second one is multiplied by the reciprocal. So you turn the second one upside down and you multiply and you get 2. Your calculator will do that for you as well. If you want to throw that in a calculator, type it in exactly how it is. It should give you that same exact answer. Okay, so as I say, you can throw it in a calculator. So I would bring a calculator with me when I'm taking this, the ACT, and I would go to my calculator and I would throw it in my calculator. And it's not going to throw in my calculator for some reason for a second. Okay, I think I've got my calculator working again. So I would do 8, and then I would just times it by a half, and you can go in and throw in your 1/2. And it will, sorry, it's taking half a second, it's just slow. 8 times a half minus 3, and then just do divided by 1/2. And you can just throw it in straight like it is, And then you don't have to think as hard and you're not going to make a mistake, or you can just use this to check your answers and make sure that you're right. And it'll give you that it is 2. So it should be pretty easy. Same thing as what we just did right here on the board. Okay, so number 9, it says, in the standard XY coordinate plane, what is the midpoint of the line segment that has endpoints 3, 8, and 1, -4? I really don't need to draw it accurately at all because they gave me the endpoints. I will do it a little bit for you, but it's not important. You went over +1, -4, and then you went over +3 and up 8 somewhere. And so really they're just looking for the midpoint of those. But to find the middle of anything is finding the average, which is adding them together and dividing in half. So all you have to do is add your x's. So I'd have to add the 1 + 3 because this is my x and my y, this is my x and my y. We're adding x's, the 1 and 3, and then divide them in half. So 1 + 3 is 4, divided in half is 2, and then you add your y's, 8 and -4, so I'd add 8 plus your -4 divided in half. So 8 plus -4 is 4, divided in half is 2, and that is my ordered pair of my middle. So like over 2, up 2, and that should be like the middle of my line somewhere in there. And my thing's not graphed 100% beautiful, but you should understand all you're doing is adding x's together, dividing them in half, adding y's together and dividing them in half because you're finding the middle or the average, the midpoint. So that should have been the letter D, 2, 2. So number 10. So number 10, it says the fluctuation of water depth that appears shown in the figure below. One of the following values gives the positive difference in feet between the greatest water depth and the least water depth shown in this graph. Which value is it? So they want the greatest. Well, the greatest water depth is right there, and that's 12 feet. And the least water depth right here is 6 feet. And they asked you for one of the following values gives the positive difference between them. So all they want you to do is subtract them, and 12 minus 6 is 6. They just wanted the difference between your highest and lowest point on your graph. Positive difference. Okay, number 11. For 11, it says, what is the slope of the line through -2, 1 and 2, -5? You need to remember your slope formula is subtracting your y's over subtracting your x's. I always remember the y's go on top because of rise over run. And if you're looking at a graph, the y-axis rises or goes up and down, and the x-axis runs this way. And so that's how you remember the y's are on top, but all it is y minus y. So if I labeled these x1, y1, and x2, y2, I would do y minus y, or -5 minus 1, over x2 minus x1, or 2 minus my -2. And -5 minus 1 is -6. 2 minus the -2 is +4. And you get -3/2 for your slope, which should be the letter D. Number 12. In Cherokee County, the fine for speeding is $17 for each mile per hour the driver is traveling over the posted speed limit. In Cherokee County, Kirk was fined $221, which is a lot of money. I would be poor. So $221 for speeding on a road with a posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour. So every mile you go over, you get charged 17 bucks. So we need to figure out how many miles he went over. We're going to do 221 divided by 17. So we're going to do 221 and divide it by 17. And you're going to end up with 13, which means he was going 13 miles per hour over the speed limit. And the question was, in Cherokee County, Kirk was fined for speeding on a road with a posted speed limit of 30 miles. Kirk was fined for traveling at what speed? So what speed was he traveling? Well, if he's 13 over the speed limit and the speed limit was 30, he's 13 plus 30. So he was going 43 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone because he's going 13 over. So number 13, it says, what is the sum of the solutions of the two equations below? So you've got two equations. You're going to separate them out. You've got this equation that says 8x equals 12. You also have this equation that says 2y plus 10 equals 22. They want the solutions, which means solve them. So I'm going to solve them. If I did the black one, or the 8x equals 12, I would divide by 8, and I would get x equals 1.5, or you can take your calculator and do 12 divided by 8 and get 1.5 if you don't know that. Then you're going to do the blue one and solve it. So you're going to minus 10, and that will give you 2y equals 12, or y is 6. And the question they asked is, what is the sum? And sum means to add. That word right there means to add the solutions together. So we want this 1.5 plus 6, and that is 7.5. So we had two solutions. One of them was 1.5, the other one was 6, and we add them together. So my answer should be the letter B as in boy, or 7.5. Number 14. The average of 5 distinct scores has the same value as the median of the 5 scores. The sum of the 5 scores is 420. What is the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median? Cool. So you have 5 scores. Okay. So when you're looking at this, it says the average of 5 scores. Well, to find an average, you add them all up and divide by how many there are. So my average, I would have added up all of my scores, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scores, and we would add them, and we would say we divide by 5. That would have given me my average. But it says the sum of the 5 scores is 420, which means if I added all of these, the sum of those scores was 420. So really all you needed to do is plug in 420 over there over 5 and divide it. And so that's going to give me 420 divided by 5. So 420 divided by 5 is going to give me 84. So I know my average is 84. With all the mess of the words in there, we know that my average is 84. The question they asked is in green. What is the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median? Well, we were told the median and the average were the same value in the first sentence. The average of 5 distinct scores is the same value as the median. So we know the median is equal to the average, which is equal to 84. So we want the sum of the 4 scores that are not the median. That would be taking all of those, the sum of all 5, and taking away the median. And the median was 84. And that gives us our answer. So we're doing 420 minus 84. 420 minus 84, and that gives us 336. And so our answer should be the letter H. A lot of words in there. The math part of that's not hard. It's understanding what it's asking is the hard part of that one. Number 15, they gave us absolute values. They're just seeing if you know how to work from the inside to the outside. And the absolute values are positive. So I've got some absolute value bars. I'm going to do this first one, that's the one in red, which is -8 plus 4 on your paper. -8 plus 4 is -4, and the absolute value of -4 is 4. Then we had this minus. And then if I did the absolute values in green, I had 3 minus 9. 3 minus 9 is -6. But the absolute value of -6 is +6. So this is what it looks like so far. And then you would have had 4 minus 6 is -2. And the absolute value of -2 is +2. Which on number 15, my answer should have been D, as in doggy, just working out or from the inside to the outside. Number 16, it says, which of the following expressions is equivalent x to the 2/3? This is if you remember that when you have rational exponents, which is a fraction in the power, that it's always inside over outside. So if you're going to write your radical, the outside of it's going to have the 3, the inside's going to have the 2. And so my answer should be that, which is the letter K. So that's just a matter of had you memorized at some point in your life, inside over outside, when you're changing from a rational exponent to radical. Number 17. In the standard xy coordinate plane, what is the slope of a line given by this equation? To find slope of a line, you're going to get it in the form of y equals mx plus b, and you want the m because that's my slope. So our whole goal is just solve for y. So if I'm solving this for y, I'm going to subtract 5 to the other side, and it's going to give me 4x minus 5 equals 7y. And then divide every single one of those by 7, and you're going to get 4/7 x minus 5/7 equals y. And so what's my slope? It's what's in front of x, or it's this value right here, this 4/7. So my answer should have been the letter B as in boy. Number 18. For which of the following conditions will the sum of integers m and n always be an odd integer? Well, really they're asking you, do you know what an integer is? And integers are all positives and negatives that are whole numbers. So it's whole numbers and their opposites. And so there you can have even and odd ones. And so you're just going to randomly check some really quick. You could either have both of them even, you could have two even numbers, or you could have one odd and one even, because you're only adding two of them together. You're adding one that's called m and one that's called n. You're having two integers. Either they're both even, one is odd and one is even, or they're both odd. Those are your only options, right? So you're going to randomly do some things and check them. So if I did both even, if I had a 2 and a 4, those are both even numbers, right? If we have both even numbers, which of the following conditions will the sum of them be an odd? If I add those together, did I get an odd number? My answer is no. And so this one can't be my answer. So they could both be odd. So 3 and a 5 are both odd numbers. You can choose any two odd numbers. It doesn't really matter. But if you add those together, you're going to get an even number again. And they wanted us to get an odd number. So it can't be this one. And so if we did, I just did that wrong. I did the bottom one. Let me write it in the right spot. Odd and odd is 3 and 5. Two odd numbers. The one in the middle is odd and even, so choose an odd number and an even number. So an odd number is 3, an even number is like 4. You can choose any even number you want. If I add those together, I get a 7. So the only ones that work that give me odd numbers is if one of them is odd and one is even. Because I only had 3 options. So I need one to be odd and one to be even. So I like K for my answer, because that said one of them is odd and one is even. So you're just going to go through quickly, because you're speeding through your test, and I get that. You have to work very fast. But just check 2 evens, 2 odds, or 1 even and 1 odd. Those are your only options. Check and find which one works. Number 19, the lengths of the 2 legs of right triangle, triangle ABC, shown below, are given in inches. The midpoint of AB is how many inches from A? So they're asking you for the midpoint of AB, or this point right there. And to do the point that's the middle of that side AB, you'd have to know the side AB. So you're going to have to use Pythagorean theorem. So you're going to do 24 squared plus 32 squared equals your AB squared, or that side squared, right? So 24 squared is 576. 32 squared is 1024. So if I add those together, so if I add that to 576, I get 1600. And 1600 equals AB squared. So square root both sides. And I'm going to get AB is 40. So I know the whole length of this is 40. We were asked to find the midpoint, and midpoint is the middle. So the middle of that would be 20 down from this side and 20 down from that side. So how many inches from A are we? We are 20 inches away from A. We just did midpoint. Number 20. It says in triangle DEF, the length of DE is square root 30. They don't tell us that DEF right here is a right triangle. I have no idea what kind of triangle it is, so I'm just drawing some random triangle and writing DEF. It's not drawn to scale, nothing's right on it, I just have some random triangle. And it says the length DE is square root 30, and the length of EF is 3. And if it can be determined, what is the length in inches of DF? And the question is, what is this guy? So you cannot use Pythagorean theorem because no one told you it was a right triangle. And Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, only works on right triangles. And nowhere did it say it's a right triangle. The only other way to solve a side for a triangle is law of sines and law of cosines. And both of those require 3 pieces of information. So like 2 sides in an angle, or all 3 sides, but you have to have 3 pieces of information. We were only given 2 pieces of information. We only had this one and this one. That's only 2 pieces of information. So we cannot determine it. from the information that they gave us. Because the only way to solve triangles, the sides, Pythagorean theorem if it's right, you can use SOHCAHTOA as well, but that has to be a right triangle. And then law of sines and cosines if it's non-right, but those both require 3 pieces of information. So we're stuck. SOHCAHTOA requires 3 pieces as well. Well, 2 pieces, because you know you're 90. We good on that one? Number 21, Laura plans to paint the 8-foot-high rectangular walls of her room. Before she buys paint, she needs to know the area of the wall surface to be painted. So there's going to be 4 walls in her room. She has a rectangular room. So it says 2 walls are 10 feet wide. So they're 10 feet wide and they're 8 feet tall, and this is going to be 2 walls that look like that. And the other 2 walls are 15 feet wide, so even wider. They're 15 feet wide and 8 feet tall, and she has 2 walls that are those. So before we go any further, we're going to find our total area of all the walls, pretending that they were solid walls. And so 8 times 10 is 80, so the area of this one was 80, but we have 2 walls, so we have 160 square feet of wall here. And then 8 times 15 is going to be 120. And so this is 120 feet for that wall, but there's 2 of them, so that's 240 feet squared. So her total would be 240 plus 160 feet squared, which means her total was 400 feet squared. But we need to finish reading the question. It said, the combined area of the 1 window and the 1 door in her room is 60 square feet. So she's got a window and a door that she's not going to paint. She has to paint around those. So she has to take that away from her 400-foot square area that she has for her paint. So you're just doing 400 minus the 360 because you're not going, or minus 60. Minus 60. What is the area in square feet of the wall surface Laura plans to paint, which is 340 feet? Because she's not going to paint her window or her door. Number 22, the length of a rectangle. So we have a rectangle, the length is 5 inches longer than the width. So if the width is W, the length is 5 inches longer, so it's W plus 5 for its length. The perimeter of the rectangle is 40. What is the width of the rectangle? So it's a rectangle, so we know the top is also W plus 5, and we know that the other side is W as well. So perimeter is going all the way around. So if I started with this W and go around and add every single side, so you'd have W plus 5 plus another W plus 5. The perimeter was 40. They told you if we went all the way around, the perimeter was 40. So that means you have 1, 2, 3, 4 W's plus 10 equals 40. The 10 came from 5 and 5 to get 10. And then you just solve it. If you minus 10, you're going to have 4W equals 30, and divide by 4, and you get 30 over 4. And that reduces, or you can just take your calculator and do 30 divided by 4 and get your 7.5. You don't want to think that through. And so my answer should be the letter F, that the width of the rectangle was 7.5 inches on number 22. Number 23. It says 8% of 60 is 1/5 of what number? Cool. So what's 8% of 60? So 8%, if you have to move your decimal over 2, you do 0.08 times 60 and figure out what that is. So you can take your calculator and do 0.08 times 60, and it'll give you 4.8. Hang on. Okay, so that gave us 4.8. There's the calculator right there. Sorry, the screen moved on you guys. Was 4.8. So I know 8% of 60 is 4.8. So really, I would rewrite this as 4.8 is 1/5 of what number? And the way I learned it when I was young is over of equals percent over 100. I don't know if you guys learned it that way or not, but we learned is over of equals percent over 100. So it says 4.8 is, so that's my is. I put it on top of what number, that's my x, because I don't know the of, is equal to percent over 100. Well, 1/5 is 20%, so I can either put 20 over 100, or I could write it as 1/5. 1/5 is going to reduce to the same thing. I mean, 20 over 100 reduces to 1/5. So if you don't like 20 over 100, you can write 1/5 right here, and you would cross multiply and solve that. And so you're going to get x times 1 as x, and 4.8 times 5. So if I times that by 5, I get 24. So this is my answer. And I don't know if you guys learned is over of equals percent over 100. I have no idea how you guys learned your percentages, but that's how I was taught it. Is over of is percent over 100. But you have to find out what that is. Okay, number 24. It says, Armin is trying to decide whether to buy a season pass to his college basketball team's 20 home games this season. The cost of an individual ticket is $14. So for an individual, it's $14, and for a season pass, it's $175. The season pass will admit Armin to any home basketball game at no additional cost. What is the minimum number of home basketball games Armin must attend this season in order for the cost of a season pass to be less than the total cost of buying an individual ticket for each game he attends? So basically they're saying, how many games does he have to go to make it worthwhile to buy a season pass? And so we're really saying we want our $14 for one ticket. That's how much each ticket's going to cost. We want it to be less than the $175. We want to solve that. So you're just going to divide by 14 on both sides. And you're going to get x has to be less than 175 divided by 14, which is 12.5. I wrote that wrong on my paper. So he'd have to do less than 12.5 games, but can you pay for half a game? No, you have to pay the ticket to enter the whole game. So you'd have to be less than 13, which means he'd have to have 13 games to make his season ticket worthwhile. Otherwise, if you only go to 12 games, then you want to buy individual tickets because it would be cheaper. Number 25. Number 25, scientific notation. The easiest thing to do is to divide the numbers on the outside. You can type it in exactly how it is though, and your calculator will give you the right answer. But because it's in scientific notation for answer, we just want to divide it. So I look at the numbers in front right here. I'm dividing those numbers. So I do 4.8 divided by 1.6. So I come over here and do 4.8 divided by 1.6, and that gives me 3. And so I know that's 3 times 10 to some power. And remember, if you have the same base, you subtract powers. So my power on the numerator is -7, and I subtract the power in the denominator, which was -11. So -7 minus the -11. These two negatives right here become positive. So -7 plus 11 is 4, and that's a positive number. So I get 3 times 10 to the 4th, which is letter A. So subtract the numbers in front, and then because your 10s have the same base, you can subtract your powers. Number 26. It says a circle in the standard XY coordinate plane has center of -1, 2. So I'm going to try and draw this a little bit for you, but I'm not an artist, so bear with me. -1, 2, and passes through 2, 6. So up here, this one down here was the center. So if I'm trying to draw this, I'm going to pretend that I can draw a circle around here. Something like that, and this one was the center, is what they're showing you. And it says line segment, oh, I probably ought to put the letters. This was C, and this one up here was A. So it says line segment AB is the diameter of the circle. So if I kept drawing that line across, I'm going to have AB right here. And so I'm going to write this was -1, 2, and this one was 2, 6. And the question was, what are the coordinates of point B, this point right here? Now the easiest thing to do is logically think it through. So to get there, so I'm going to have an ordered pair. I'm going to look at my x's first. So I'm looking at this x up here, it's a 2. And to get to the center, which is halfway, down to here, because center is halfway from the diameter, from 2 to the x value to of -1 was 3 units, because from 2 to -1 is 3 units. You'd have to go over 1, 2, 3 on the x-axis, right? So to go from center down to B, I have to go over 3 units as well. So from this -1, I had to go over 1, 2, 3. So -1 and 3 units to the left is -4. And then I would do my y values, and I'd look at my y. So the one at point A is 6. To get to my center, which was 2, I had to subtract 4 from it. 6 minus 4 gave me 2. So to get to my next one, I'd have to do 2 minus 4, which is -2. And you can look at it and look at your picture 2, 3, 4, and see if it looks like it's somewhat right, that it was over left 4 down 2 to get my answer. You can obviously get rid of J and K on this, because over 4, 2 and up 5, 10 is not even in the right quadrant. It's not even going in the right direction. If you drew your picture, you'd know those can't be it at all. Okay. Number 27. Which of the following expressions is a factor of x cubed minus 64? I will show you a couple ways to do this. The first way is, if you remember a formula, which most people only use to memorize for their test and forget the next day. And so this is probably not the way to approach this unless you're somebody who retains formulas really well in your head. So there's a formula that you did learn that was a difference of cubes. A cubed minus b cubed equals a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. But again, it's one that people most of the time forget. I mean, if you see it, you go, oh yeah, I learned that once in my life, but I don't remember it. So if I'm looking at this x cubed minus 64, I could rewrite that as x cubed minus 4 cubed, because 4 cubed is the exact same thing as 64. And I would have said, everywhere there's an a, I write x, so I write an x there, x here. Everywhere there's a b, I write 4, so I put a 4 here, a 4 here, and 4 squared, which is 16. And then whatever signs were above there, I just write them in. This is what it factored to. So which of the following is a factor? There were only 2, x minus 4 and x squared plus 4x plus 16. And my answer would have been A, because that's the only one that's right. The bottom one has the wrong signs in it. That letter E is the wrong signs for the other one. So if you didn't know that, if you can't remember the formula, you may be able to remember to graph it. So if I did x cubed minus 64 in my calculator, and so x cubed minus 64, and I graph that really quick in my calculator, I get this pretty little picture. And I say, where did it cross the x-axis? It only crossed at the number 4. Well, so if that's the only place it crossed, I know that one of them had to be x minus 4, because I would set that to 0 to get the 4. If I wanted to find the other one, because sometimes they'll make you find the long one, I would have said, I know 4 works, because I graphed it, so I know 4 works, and I'd come back here. If 4 works, I know I can synthetically divide into this to get the rest of them. So I have an x cubed, which is 1. I don't have an x squared, that's 0. I did not have an x to the first, that's 0. And then I have a negative 64, because I have to have a number for every power, leading coefficient for every power. Then you would synthetically divide, you drop your 1, you'd get 4 times 4 is 16, add those and get 16, multiply those and get 0. And we started with a cubic, because this was x cubed up here. So you drop your power by 1, that's x squared and x, and it would have given you x squared plus 4x plus 16. And that would have given you your second one, and your first one would come by that 4, because we divided by 4, and you'd have to know that was x minus 4. And that's the exact same thing you're getting up here. 2 different ways to get that same answer. memorizing the thing in red, memorizing that formula and knowing it, which most people, as I say, don't have it memorized, don't know it, or know how to graph it and synthetically divide, which more people can do that second one, the one in green, to get the right answer. But those are your options on it. Okay, number 28, I guess, I mean, if you only have the binomial like A, B, C, and D, the other option is to work backwards. A solution will always give you 0. So you could plug it in. If you set this to 0, you'd get 4, and plug a 4 in and give you 0. Plug in a -4, plug in a -64, plug in a -16 or whatever. That's squared, so that one's weird. But if it gave you 0, it would work as well. It's just going to kill you on the E, because if E is the right answer, if they had the right signs there, that one you're going to have to do one of those 2 ways. So that's what I would do. Number 28. The average of a list of 4 numbers is 90. So I'm going to have 4 numbers. I don't know what they are. So this is how I started it, and maybe is a little weird, but I said I had 4 numbers, x plus y plus z, and then I had another number, so I put, I don't know, I think I put w. X plus y plus z plus w. I got 4 numbers. To average them, you divide by 4, and I would say my average was 90, because that's what the first sentence said. The average of 4 numbers is 90. A new list of 4 numbers has the same first 3 numbers, so my new list is x plus y plus z. It has the same first 3 numbers, but the 4th number in the original list is 80. So they told us what this number right here was, that w. They said it was 80. The 4th number in our original list was 80, and the 4th number in the new list was 96, because they told me that right there. And then they said, what is the average of the new list? And so the question is, what is this guy over here? What's its average? And so the trick to doing this is saying, wow, this x plus y plus z is the exact same as this x plus y plus z. If I added them together, I get the same big number, whatever it is, 300 and something, we don't really know. But whatever this number is, this is the same. So I'm going to call it something. So I'm going to call this A. Because if I called it A, it's the same as this, saying A plus 80 is the same as A plus 96. So I'd have A plus 80 over 4 equals 90. Multiply both sides by 4, and you're going to get A plus 80 equals 360, because I times by 4 on the left and the right. Those canceled. And then minus 80 over here. And that tells me that A is 280. Or my first 3 numbers, the sum of them, adding them together, was 280. So now I can take this 280 and I can plug it in for this A up here, because I know the first 3 numbers added to 280. So I'd have 280 plus 96 over 4 is going to equal the average of that, which is what they wanted me to know. So I'm going to do 280 plus 96 divided by 4. So see if I can throw that in here. So 280 plus 96 all over 4. Hit enter, and it's going to tell me that my new average was 94. So that's this guy over here, which is my answer, or 94 right here for 28. Okay, so number 29, it says the number A is located at negative 2.5, and they make this problem look so hard, and it's really not hard. They said your A is right here. One of the following number lines shows the location of A squared. Well, really, they're saying, what is negative 2.5 squared? And you have a calculator. If you don't know that in your head, you can go to your calculator, and you could say negative 2.5 squared, and say, wow, negative 2.5 squared is 6.25. And so you're going to come back here and say, I'm looking for the number 6.25, and the only one is the letter E, because it's over at positive 6.25 over here. Because this is at a negative 6, that's negative 5, wherever. You can look at your number lines. They made it look really hard, and it's probably the easiest one on the whole thing. So that one should be pretty good. Maria ordered a pizza. She ate only 2/9 of it and gave the remaining pizza to her 3 brothers. So if she ate, so this is Maria, she ate 2/9. How much is left if she ate 2/9? And that should be 7/9, because there should be 7/9 left over. If you did 1 minus 2/9, because they had 1 whole pizza and you took away your 2/9, I could write it up here for those who don't understand what you're doing. 1 whole pizza minus 2/9, get a common denominator, and you would get 7/9. And so 7/9 were left over, and she gave the remaining pizza to her 3 brothers. What fraction of the whole pizza will each of Maria's brothers receive if they share the remaining pizza equally? So what they want you to do is 7/9. We're going to take that much of the pizza and divide it with our 3 brothers. So we're going to take 7/9 and we're going to divide it by 3. But when we divide, we have to multiply by the reciprocal, which means we had to do 7/9 times 1/3, and that's 7/27. Or they are going to get, if you cut the pizza in 27 little itty bitty pieces, they each get 7 of those little pieces. 7/27. So that's what number 30 is. And we have officially made it halfway through. Number 31. The number 1001 is the product of the prime numbers 7, 11, and 13. Knowing this, what is the prime factorization of 30,030? Well, the easy one to do is take off anything that's not prime. So it's a composite number. Remember, prime are numbers multiplied by themselves in 1. So if I look at letter A, I know it can't be A because 10 is composite. 10 is 2 times 5, so it can't be A. I know it can't be B because 30 is 2 times 5 times 3. And so that's composite. So that's definitely not it. Letter C has all prime numbers, so it could be C. It can't be D because 10 is composite. And now you're down to, and it can be E, they're all prime. So now you're down to only 2 choices for your answer. So you basically, you can sit there and times them in and do 2 times 5 times 7 times 11 times 13, which should be really fast. 2 times 5 times 7 times, I already forgot what it said. 11 and 13 and 13, and say, did that give me 30,000? And no, and so you do your last one and do 2 times 3 times 5 times 7 times 11 times 13, and you go, wow, that did give me the right answer, and so my answer has to be E. That's how I approached it. Another thing that you could do, and maybe what they're asking you to see, is that 30,030 is divisible by this. That's why they gave you that number at the beginning. So if I had taken 30,030 in my calculator and done 30,030 and divide it by that 1001, it gave me 30. So I already know that it was the 7, 11, and 13, because that's what multiplied to equal the 1,000. So I already knew this, and it was times 30. Well, 30 is 2 times 3 times 5 if I factor tree it out. If I did this, if I did 30, 2 goes into it 15 times, and 3 goes into it 5. And I get that it was 2 times 3 times 5. That's how I knew the prime factorization of it. Does that make sense? So depends which way you want to go about it. To me, if you could eliminate 3, it was so much easier just to plug those 2 in the calculator. It was fast and easy than to think it through and divide the 2 circled red numbers up in there in the question and then figure it out from there. So anyway, that's what I did to get to my answer. So number 32, it says, Makia, an intern with the Parks and Recreation Department, is developing a proposal for the new trapezoidal Springdale Park. The figure below shows her scale drawing of the proposed, it's actually to the right, scale drawing of the proposed park with 3 side lanes and the radius of the merry-go-round given in inches. In Makia's scale drawing, 1 inch represents 1.5 feet. What is the area in square inches of the scale drawing of the park? So do we care about the merry-go-round at all if we're trying to find the area of the park? And my answer is no. It was superfluous information that they didn't care. They're trying to confuse you. All we care about is the area of the park. And so if I'm going to do the area of the park, I'm going to drop an altitude down right here. And I would know that this area, right, or that length is 28 because at the very top it was 28. If the whole bottom of my trapezoid is 40, I would do 40 minus 28, which gives me that this green thing over here was 12. because 28 and 12 is 40 inches. I also know my height right here. My height, this blue height or altitude that I drew in this piece, is 16 because the other side of that rectangle is 16. So then I can just say, hey, if I want the total area, I have to do the area of the triangle, and add it to the area of the rectangle. Well, the rectangle is easy. It's length times width. So it would be 28 inches wide or long and 16 inches high. So this is 28 by 16, or 28 times 16. And I could throw that in my calculator and do 28 times 16 and say that's 448. And the area of a triangle is always half the base times its height. So it's half the base, which is 12, and its height, which is 16. And you can look at your triangle. We're looking at this red triangle right here. The base was 12, the height was 16, where those numbers came from. If I did half of 12 times 16, I think that's 96, but we'll check. 1/2 of 12 times 16, and that should give us 96. And so my total area is 448 plus the 96, the rectangle plus the triangle. And so we should have 448 plus 96, and that gives us 544, or the whole area of our park is 544 inches squared. Now, remember that an inch is 1.5 feet, because that'd be a really, really, really small park if it was just inches. So remember that that was a scale factor there. Okay, so 32 should have been the letter G. So number 33, they give you the exact same information, but now they're asking you a different question. It says Makia's proposal includes installing a fence on the perimeter of the park. What is the perimeter in feet of the fence? And notice they italicize the word feet. Anytime that they italicize a word, you want to square it off and say, this is something that is important that I remember, that I know how to, that I convert everything back to. Okay, so we want the perimeter in feet of the park. So we're going to find all the sides. We know 3 of the sides. That's easy. This one is 40 inches, this is 16, and this one's 28. I need to find the third one, which is the red one, or the fourth one. It's this red one right here. Remember, we already drew a triangle over here. The base of it was 12 and the height was 16. We're going to use Pythagorean theorem to find the length of the hypotenuse right there, because this is a 90-degree angle. So we're going to find that hypotenuse. So we're going to go 12 squared plus 16 squared equals c squared. And so that's going to be 144 plus 256 equals c squared. And if you add those together, you get 356, 400 equals c squared. So c is 20. And so this side right here is 20. So if I just did the perimeter in inches, just added up everything around the side, I would end up with that I have this 20 right here, plus the top, which is 28, plus the right side, I guess it's right, would be 16, and the whole bottom was 40. So if we add all those together, we'd have 60, 76, 96, I think that's 104. If you add all those together, and you guys can throw that in your calculator, that is not the right answer. And the reason it's not the right answer is because that's inches. Remember that everything in this was a scale factor of inches. And they asked us to find it in feet. That's why we blocked this little guy off, or squared it and said we have to have it in feet. Well, in the directions it says Makia's scale drawing is 1 inch represents 1.5 feet. So all you have to do is times that by 1.5. So if we came to our calculator and we did 1.5 times our 104, you would have had 156 square feet, or feet squared, however you want to say that. And so my answer should have been the letter E. And again, people miss it because they are going too fast, and they write the 104 and they say, wow, that's C, and C looks like an awesome answer because C is always right. That's what everybody thinks. It's not true. But pay attention. Whenever they have something that's italicized, make sure that you notice it and say, hey, they're trying to tell me something. They're trying to tell me something important that I'm supposed to be doing on this. Okay, number 34. Again, exact same problem. It says the length of the south side of the park is what percent of the length of the north side. And they were very kind to you, and they drew you a compass. Hopefully you guys can see that. So you would know which direction was north and which direction was south. So the length of the south side of the park is 40. And so if we wrote it, it says 40 is what percent of the north side? And the north side is the one on the top, which is 28. If I write it in words, it's easy for me to do because then I do the same thing of is over of equals percent over 100 that we did on the other one. So 40 is, so that goes in the is, what percent, that's my x, over 100, of 28. So of is my 28. And I just use the is over of equals percent over 100. Then I can cross multiply and solve that out. And so I would get 28 times x, just 28x, and 40 times 100 is 4,000. And then divide the 28 over, and that will give me x equals 4,000 divided by 28, divided by 28, and that gives me 142.85. And that is this answer right here. The only one that's 142. I mean, you could change it to a fraction or whatever. It's a mess, but it's this one right here. We good? Okay, number 35. The Smith family is planning to build a 3-room cabin. This one drove me nuts because they gave you so much information that was absolutely worthless, which consists of 2 bedrooms, and 1 living room. Shown below are the rectangular floor plans. It's actually to the right. And a side view of the cabin. In the side view, the roof forms an isosceles triangle. So we know this is isosceles. That's why the base angles are the same. The walls are perpendicular to the level floor, which means they have 90-degree angles down here. And it says ED in AC are parallel. So, or the floor ED. So AC is parallel to ED. So they said this line right here and this line right here are parallel to each other. And they also said F is the midpoint of AC. So F is midpoint, right here is the middle of that top. And it said BF is perpendicular to AC. So if I drew a line from B to F, that formed a 90-degree angle right there. And every single piece of information they just told you has absolutely nothing to do with this problem. It's to make you take time so you have less time to do your work. So just telling you, going through all that, you need to pay attention to what information they give you, but realize the ACT almost always gives you superfluous information or information that you do not need to use, that are just trying to confuse the heck out of you. So for on 35, it says, Mr. Smith plans to build a 3-foot wide walkway around the outside of the cabin, and that's this little piece right here. On the left, I'm sorry, because when I point you can't see it. That walkway around the outside of the cabin is shown in the floor plan. What will the area in square feet of the top surface of the walkway be? So what they want you to do is they want you to take the area of the blue rectangle. So area of blue rectangle. And if you take away the area of the red rectangle, so the area of red rectangle, you would be left with the shaded area. Because if you cut out that red rectangle, you'd have a walkway going around your cabin. So I need the area of the blue. I need to know how long it is. So I need to know how long this guy right here is. That whole big long line on the left side is what I'm looking at. And I'm going to get rid of it so you can see. The walkway, they told you, was 3 feet. A 3-foot wide walkway. That means from right here to right here is 3 feet. And from right here to right here is 3 feet. I don't know if you know where those are. Let me put them in green. From there to there is 3 feet, and from here to here is 3 feet, because my walkway is 3 feet wide. So on the left side, the rectangle has 36 plus 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom, which is 42 feet. Okay, so For those of you who are brighter than me and just noticed, they gave you the left side and the right side of this different measurements, so you didn't even have to look at your 30. So if I did the area of the blue rectangle, it's 36 on the left times the whole length, which is 30. And then the area of the red rectangle, hopefully you guys are brighter than me and saw that it's 30 from here to here. So that's 30 from the height, right? This piece right there is 30. Get rid of this mess. And its width across the top is 24. And so all you have to do is plug in 36 times 30, which is 1,080, minus 30 times 24, which is 720. And so 1,080 minus 720 should give me the area of your walkway, which is 360. So they did give you the measurements off to the side. Wow, when I did it, on the first time, I only noticed the one measurements, and so I was working off one measurement and was doing the 3 feet on each side. But either way, it works both ways. It's better if you notice that they have the measurement right there of 30 feet for your height and 36 for your height, and 24 and 30. Is everybody okay on that one that's in here? Okay. 36. 36 said, Mrs. Smith will install a ceiling fan in each room of the cabin and will place curtains over the 4 windows. Each of the ceiling fans has a price of $52. So it says she's going to put a ceiling fan in each room. And I've got 3 rooms. I have 2 bedrooms and a living room. So I'm going to have 3 ceiling fans for $52 a piece. The price of curtains for each small window is $39.50. So if we look for small windows, it's the S next to the side. So there's a small window here, a small window here, and a small window here, which means I have 3 small windows. So 3 times $39.50. So it says the price of curtains for each small window is $39.50, and the price of curtains for the large window, and we only have 1 large window. It's this red one right there. So we only have 1 large window, and the cost is twice that for the small window. So 2 times $39.50. So we'd come back to our calculator and do 2 times $39.50 and get $79 for our large window. And based on this information, which of the following values is closest to the total price Mrs. Smith will pay for curtains and ceiling fans? So we just want to throw it in the calculator just like that. So we want to do 3 times 52 plus 3 times the 39.5 plus 79. And it should give us $353.50. And they said which is closest, so we probably won't find that exact amount. The closest to 353 is $354. So it should be our letter J. Okay. Number 37, Mr. and Mrs. Smith plan to roof the cabin on 2 consecutive days. Assuming that the chance of rain is independent of the day, what is the probability that it will rain both days? And it tells you over here, in really small letters if you read it, during the week, the Smiths plan to roof the cabin. There is a 20% chance of rain each day. So we're going to do it 2 consecutive days. The probability that it's going to rain on the first day is 20%. That's 0.20 if you write it as a decimal. And the probability that it will rain the second day is also 20% because it said that it's independent. They're going to have the exact same chance both days. Well, if we have the same chance both days, you're multiplying those together. So you're doing 0.20 times 0.20. So 0.20 times 0.20, and you should get 0.04. So there's only a 4% chance that it's going to rain both days on our beautiful little calendar. That's just probability straight across. 38. Which of the following expressions, when evaluated, equals an irrational number? An irrational number is a number that goes on forever and ever and ever and never repeats. If I have a square root on top and bottom, or a cube root or a fifth root, if they're the exact same index on top and bottom, I can divide them. 2 goes into both 2 and 8. So 2 will go into itself once, and 2 will go into 8 4 times. Well, the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 4 is 2. And 1/2 is not irrational. It can be written as a fraction, so it's not that one. I can reduce these as well. 2 will go into itself once, and 2 into 8 4 times, and I get the square root of 4 over 1, which is just 2. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 8 squared, the square and square root cancel, and that just gives me 8. And so that's a whole number. That's not going on forever and ever. Square root of 2 times square root of 8 is the square root of 16, and the square root of 16 is 4, which is a whole number as well, so that's not irrational. But if I add these together, you cannot add them unless you have the same root underneath. But I mean, you could simplify this. The square root of 8 is 2 times 2 times 2, so you could pull a 2 out, and you'd have the square root of 2 plus 2 root 2, which is 3 root 2, but that is irrational because I have this square root of 2 there, which is a decimal that goes forever and ever and ever and never repeats. And so it is my answer right there that is irrational. Anytime you have a square root that is not a perfect square, then it is irrational. If you don't know what that means. If I have the square root of 4, that's a perfect square. I can square root it. So this one is rational. But if I have the square root of 5, I can't square root it. That's irrational. Square root of 6, can't square root it. It's irrational. Square root of 7 is irrational. Square root of 8 is irrational. Square root of 9 is rational because square root of 9 is a whole number. It's 3. So most of your square roots are going to be irrational unless they can simplify down. Okay? 39, it says a line through the origin and 10, 4 in the standard xy coordinate plane below. The acute angle between the line and the positive x-axis has measure of theta, so they wrote it right there. This is what is the value of tangent theta. So this is, do you know SOHCAHTOA? It's, do you know SOHCAHTOA? Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Your triangle is right here. You went over 10 and up 4 to get to that point. And so if you're doing tangent of theta, which is what they asked, tangent of theta is the tangent's this one, and it's opposite over adjacent. So tangent is the opposite side over the adjacent side. And I really should put a theta in there. Tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent. So my opposite of theta is 4, my adjacent is 10, and you just reduce it and get 2/5. 2 goes into both of them. 2 will go into 4 twice, and 2 will go into 10 5 times. That's all that one was, is do you know SOHCAHTOA? So number 40. The equation, this has 2 solutions. Those solutions are equal to the solutions to which of the following pairs of equations. So I have to find the, I have to do the problem. I have 2x minus 8 plus 3 equals 5. To solve that problem, I have to get the absolute value by itself. So I minus 3 to the other side, and that will give me 2x minus 8. The absolute value is equal to 2. Because it's absolute values are distance from 0 in the positive and negative direction. So I have to set it equal to positive and negative. So I'm going to set up my 2 cases. I'm going to write 2x minus 8 is 2, and 2x minus 8 is negative 2. Because I have to set it up so it's equal to the positive and negative of that side over there. Once I do that, the absolute values go away. That's why there's no absolute values drawn there. And I just solve it. So I'm going to add 8 to this side, and that will give me 2x is 10, or x is 5. And then I'm going to add 8 to this side over here. It's going to give me 2x is 6, and x is 3. Those are my 2 solutions. So it told you it had 2 solutions. I found them. And then it said, those solutions are equal to the solutions to which of the following pairs of equations. Well, the easiest thing is just to throw them in and see what works. So I'm going to start with 5. So, and I'm only starting with 5 because it's first right there. It could be, I could start with a 3, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to plug it into this top one on F. So if I did 2 times 5 minus 5 equals 5, did it work on the top? Yes. So I need to find one that works on each of them. So I'm going to see if it works on anything on G. If I plug in 2 times 5 minus 8 is 2. 10 minus 8 is 2. It works there. 2 times on the next one. 2 times 5 minus 8 equals 8. 10 minus 8 is not 2. Is 2, and 2 is an 8. So it didn't work right here. But it only has to work in one equation, not both. So I have to try the next one. So I plug it in the one down here. And I'm going to have negative parenthesis, if I could put a parenthesis there. 2 times 5 minus 8. So 2 times 5 is 10 minus 8 is 2 with a negative, and negative 2 doesn't equal 8, so it didn't work in this one. So I know H is a bad guy. Can't work in 8 at all. And so then I have to do the J. If I plug in a 5 on J, I'm going to come down here because it's getting crowded. So I'm going to do 2 times 5 minus 8, and that is 2, so it worked in J. And so then I'm going to do the K. And I would do 2 times 5 minus 8 equals 2 again, and it worked in K. And so I get the 5 that works in everything except for H. So far, so good? So I've tried 5. I need to try my 3. So 3 has to work in one of them, right? So if I did 3 up in the top one up here in F, if I plug 3 in the top, I would have 2 times 3 is 6 minus 5 is not 5, because 6 minus 5 is 1. So it didn't work in that. If I tried 3 in the one right below it, I'd have negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And negative 6 minus 5 is negative 11. So it didn't work here, which means this guy's bad. So then I'm trying G, the letter G, and I plug in my 3. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 8 is negative 2. And that is not the same as positive 2, so it didn't work in that one. Plug 3 in the bottom one. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And negative 6 minus 8 is negative 14. Negative 14 is not 2, so it didn't work in anything up there. So then I come down to J and I try J. If I plug 3 in the top equation, I have 6 minus 8 is negative 2. Doesn't work here because that's positive 2. If I plug 3 in here, 2 times 3 is 6 minus 8 is negative 2. And negative 2 times a negative is a positive 2, so it doesn't work there. So then I try my K down here. The top one on K, 2 times 3 is 6 minus 8 is negative 2, doesn't work there. I try 3 down here, 2 times 3 is 6, minus 8 is negative 2, times the negative is positive 2, so it did work here. So the 3 worked here, the 5 worked in the one right above it, and my answer has to be K, because 3 and 5 worked in those 2 equations. It's a long problem to do. Only because you have to find the solutions and then you have to backtrack and see which ones they work in. They gave you small numbers. You should be able to do it in your head to check, which is faster than trying to calculate it out in a calculator. But you do have to go through and check. Had I chosen 3 first, 3 only worked in one of them, and I would have immediately known it was K. But I chose 5 first, so it made my problem long. Sorry. But that's how you do it. Ready for 41? 41. The frequency chart below shows the cumulative number of Mrs. Hernandez science students whose test scores fell within certain score ranges. All test scores are whole numbers. How many students have a test score in the interval from 71 to 80? So if I'm looking at this, it says, and I'm going to start on the bottom because I think it makes more sense to start down here, between 65 and 100. So here's my score of 65, and here, way over here, is my score of 100. And there's a total of 21 students that fell in between there, between 65 and 100. That's what the bottom said, right? The one right above it said if I'm between 65 and 90. So if I'm between 65 and 90, so I only went over here to wherever 90 is, there were 19 people here. So if there's 19 people in this one, how many were between 90 and 100? And there should be 2. Because there were 21 students in the green rectangle. If 19 are in the red, that left 2 in this little spot right there to the right. Okay, so then I do my next one. So now I'm doing 65 to 80. So if I started at 65 and I only went over to 80, I'm going to move this 19, won't move. So if I move the 19 just up to the top so it's not so confusing. Okay, so 65 to 80, there were 13 in the blue rectangle. So if I did my blue rectangle, there's only 13 here. So in the red, there were 19. There's only 13 in the blue, which means there were 6 of them sitting over here. And then if I did my last one, which is 65 to 70, so the black one, 65 to 70 is right here. This is 70, the black one. It said there were 12 right here. Well, if there's 12 in the black and there were 13 in the blue, that means there's only 1 right here. So the question was, how many students have a test score in the interval 71 to 80? Between my 70 and 80 is 1 person. So that was just trying to narrow it down to see where they were in between. You can get that from looking over here and just do 13 minus 12 and get 1. And that's much faster and easier if you understand the concept of what they're showing you, if you understand that box. If you don't understand the box, draw it all out. If you do understand the box and you've done frequency tables enough, you should just be able to go 13 minus 12 and get 1. Okay? 42. The number of decibels D produced by an audio source can be modeled by the equation D equals 10 log I over K, where I is the sound intensity of the audio source and K is a constant. It says how many decibels are produced by an audio source whose sound intensity is 1,000 times the value of K. So that means my intensity, 10 log, this I right here is 1,000 times K. So this is 1,000 K over K. The bottom was never changed. That K is still in the denominator. They told you your intensity is 1,000 times K. So my I was 1,000 times K. And I plugged it in for the I. So you should be able to see that the K's cancel. And you would have D equals 10 log of 1,000. I will do this by hand, but realize you do have a calculator and you can throw it in the calculator. The base on a log is 10 if it's not written. So if this base is 10, I can make 1,000 be 10 to some power. I know 1,000 is 10 cubed. 10 cubed is 1,000. These would have canceled and I would have 10 times 3, which is 30. That's doing it by hand. If you did not know that, you could have thrown this in a calculator and just done 10 log 1,000. So you could have come over here and done 10 log 1,000, and it would have given you 30 as well, without simplifying it by hand. The trick again to doing that problem is to understand what's underlined in green in the problem, that the I is 1,000 K, knowing that you're putting in 1,000 K for that I. Okay, 42. Mario plays basketball on a town league team. The table below gives Mario's scoring statistics for last season. How many points did Mario score playing basketball last season? So he attempted 80 free throws, and he had a 75% rate. So he gets 1 point as 75% of the time times 80. So if I did 0.75 times 80 in my calculator, 0.75 times 80, that means he gets 60 points. So this is 60, and he got 1 point for each of those, which is 60 points, right? Of his 2-point shots, he made 90% of the time. He made them 90% of the time, which is really, really, really amazing. 90% of the time, but he only shot 60 of them. So you would do 90% of 60, 0.9 times 60, and you would get 54, which means he made 54 shots, but he got 2 points for every shot he made. So if I'm keeping track of my points, the first one he made 60 points. The second one he gets 2 points for all 54 shots, which is 108 points. You get 2 points for every time you make it. And then his 3-point shots down here, his 3-point shots he made 25% of the time, and he shot 60 of them. So if you did 0.25 times 60, you're going to get 15, which means he made 15 baskets. But every single basket he made, he earned 3 points for, so he got a total of 45 points for the 3-point shots, because he got 3 points for each of the 15 baskets. If you add those together, you would get something like 213, which is letter C. Number 44. Says the graph of y equals the absolute value of x minus 6 is in the standard xy coordinate plane. Which of the following transformations, when applied to the graph of y equals the absolute value of x, results in the graph of this one? So the only thing they did from the absolute value of x to go to this is they moved it 6 units. Remember, it's opposite direction there, so instead of going to -6, you went to the negative direction. Because of this minus, you always go opposite. So we went to the positive direction, and the positive direction is to the right. So you went right 6 coordinates. So it should be the letter F on 44. Number 45. Toby wants to find the volume of a solid toy soldier. He fills a rectangular container, so he's got some kind of rectangular container. I don't know what it looks like, but you've got something sitting here. It's a rectangular container. It's 8 centimeters long, 6 centimeters wide, and 10 centimeters high. So 6, 8, and 10 centimeters high. With water to a depth of 4 inches. So when he's filling it, his depth is only going to be 4 inches. So he's going to have water down here, but it's only 4 inches, right? So if I'm doing the volume of the water, so volume of water, it'd be length times width times height, or 6 times 8 times 4, because my water is only 4 inches high. It's not this filling the entire container, which is 10 inches, or 10 centimeters. Sorry, we're in centimeters. It says Toby totally submerges the toy soldier in the water. So with the soldier, the water is going to be different. The height of the water with the submerged toy soldier is 6.6 centimeters. So its volume would be length times width, or 6 times 8 times its height, which is 6.6, because it made the water rise when you put the little toy soldier in there. Which of the following is closest to the volume in cubic centimeters of the toy soldier? Well, if we find what the blue one is, the toy soldier, and we take out the water, which is the black one, then it will give us the right answer. So we're going to do 6 times 8 times 6.6. 8 times 6.6, and that gave us 316.8. So this is 316.8. And if I did 6 times 8 times 4, you're going to get 192. And so the soldier is going to be if I subtract those two numbers, if I take out the water. So 316.8 minus 192. And that should give me 124.8, or my toy soldier should be 124.8. And we're going to say the closest number to that is 125, because it says which of the following is closest. It doesn't say an exact. So our closest is A, 125. Number 46. It says a box is in the shape of a cube. So we're going to have some kind of cube here. Pretend I can draw a square, because that's what a cube is. Has to be square. So we've got some kind of cube going here, not a rectangular cube, but or rectangular prism. It should be a cube. It looks too long, but whatever. A box in the shape of a cube has an interior side length of 18 inches. Now remember, a cube is perfect square, so it's length times width times height. Everything is 18 everywhere. It's just like a Rubik's Cube. It's a square cube. And is used to ship a right circular cylinder with a radius of 6 inches and a height of 12. And so I can't draw this at all, but you know, we could pretend that I could. Hang on, I hit the wrong button. Okay, our picture should look better now. We drew a picture, we paused it and drew a picture. So it said the box is 18 by 18 by 18, and it's used to ship a right circular cylinder with a radius of 6. So we have a green little cylinder inside of it with a radius of 6 inches and a height of 12 inches. So it's not all the way to the top of the box, nor does it go to all the sides of the box, and you got the corners as well. And so they put packing material in there. It says the interior of the box not occupied by the cylinder is filled with packing material. Which of the following numerical expressions gives the number of cubic inches of the box filled with packing material? So they want to know how much of the box has packing material in it. So basically you're taking the volume of the box, and subtracting the volume of the cylinder. And so that would give you the packing area. So volume of a box is length times width times height, or 18 times 18 times 18. And the volume of a cylinder, remember, if the base is the exact same as the top of it, then the volume is always the area of the base times the height. That base is area of base. If I'm looking at the cylinder, the base of a cylinder is a circle. So the area of a circle is pi r squared. I'll write it up here, pi r squared times its height. Because the area of the base was pi r squared, and then we're going to have our height. So if I'm doing the cylinder one, it's pi times my radius, which is 6, squared, times its height, which is 12. And so if I'm looking at what they did, they said, all of them pretty much, not all, but a lot of them said 18 cubed. So 18 times 18 times 18 is 18 cubed. And they left the rest just like it is. So we are trying to find 18 cubed minus pi times 6 squared times 12, which looks about like that one, letter J. They didn't even make you solve it out and figure out what the number was. They just wanted to know if you knew the formula. And more specifically, if you knew the formula for a cylinder, to find the volume of a cylinder, because most people already know boxes, really easy, length times width times height. It's the cylinder one that people mess up on. So number 47 is that a room has a rectangular floor that is 15 feet by 21 feet, so 15 by 21. What is the area of the floor in square yards? Notice that the yards is italicized again, so we have to pay attention to that these were feet, and we want the area in yards. And so I would want to change those to yards before I find its area. So there's 3 feet in a yard, so change to yards first. Change to yards. And my new one in yards would be, if it was 15 feet for the height in my rectangle, then in yards you divide it by 3 and you'd say, hey, this was 5 yards. And this was 21 feet for its length, so you divide it by 3 and you'd say it was 7 yards wide. So if I want the area of the floor in square yards, it's just 5 times 7, or 35 square yards, which is B, because it would be length times width. Do not do the area first, do 15 times 21, and then divide it by 3, because that's squared. You would have to divide it by 9 to get the right answer if you were doing that, because if you did 15 feet times 21 feet, that 15 times 21, whatever that is, and I really don't know what it is, it's going to give you 315, so you'd have 315 feet squared. You want to change that to yards, you would have to, if I was changing that to yards, you would have to say 3 feet is 1 yard, but that feet was only going to get rid of one of your feet up here. So you're going to have to do 3 feet is 1 yard so that you can get rid of the square, because that was foot squared. So to get rid of them that way, you would have to do 315 divided by 3 divided by 3 again. And that's why it messes people up, because they don't pay attention to their units on the feet. So just to finish that last one off, if I did that 315 divided by 3 divided by 3, divided by 3 and divide by 3 again, that will give me the same answer. It's just the biggest mistake people do make, again, is they times them first and get the area and not pay attention that it's feet squared. And they just do 15 times 21 and divide by 3. Remember, if you are canceling things out, you got to make sure you got feet squared. You got to have 2 feet to get rid of them. Anyway, 35 is my answer. 48, it says, ABC cabs and taxi, lost it right there. ABC cabs and Terry taxi cabs both have an initial fare of a whole number of dollars for one passenger. The fare increases a whole number of dollars at each whole number of miles traveled. The graphs below show the one passenger fees in fares in dollars for both cab companies for trips up to 6 miles. When the fares of the two cab companies are compared, what is the cheaper fare for a $5 or 5-mile trip? So they want to know if you understand step graphs. So 5-mile trip, go over to where it says 5, and then you want to go up, and you want to find where it's a solid dot. So you're not going to stop here at 10. You're going to go up because that's open circle. You're going to go all the way up until you hit a solid dot, and that's how much it's going to cost you. So this guy's going to cost $12 on the ABC cabs. And if I did the Terry taxi cabs at 5 is right here. I go up until I find the solid dot, and then I go over, and I say that one's going to cost me $9. So which is the cheaper fare? The Terry taxi cabs is less money. So on 48, I'm not even on the right page. Oh, and they wanted to know what it was. What is the cheaper fare? It's the $9 right there. Because one was $12 and one was $9. Number 49. The graph of a function f of x, y equals f of x consists of 3 line segments. The graph and the coordinates of the endpoints of the 3 line segments are shown in the standard xy coordinate plane below. What is the area in square coordinate units of the region bounded by the graph of y equals f of x, the positive x-axis, and the positive y-axis? And I know I said those in reverse order, but yeah, we get it. Okay, so they want you to break these up into rectangles and triangles and find the area. And so mine's not going to be pretty because I'm not as talented at drawing as they are, but basically we want this area right here. So for me, I broke it up in a rectangle right here, and I went across right here, and I said I want this green rectangle. So when I look at it, I say I want this green rectangle right here. Hopefully you can see that green rectangle. That green rectangle is over 3 units and up 3 units because of the 0.33. So if it's over 3 and up 3, I know that this is 9. And that was the easy one. And I just need to find the area of the rectangles or the triangles, the little one on top and the one to the right. I'm going to do the one to the right next. So if I did this triangle over here, I know its base is 2 units because this was 3 and this was 5 because I went over 3. You can look at the ordered pairs and see that. And 3 to 5 is 2 units. So I know my base is 2. That's a right triangle. I know my height was 3 because I went up 3 units there. So to find the area of a triangle, it's 1/2 the base, which is 2, times the height, which is 3. Half of 2 is 1 times 3 is 3, or the area of that triangle on the right is 3. And then I did my little triangle on the top. And so the little triangle on the top, which is this little guy right here. Well, I know he's up 1 unit because this one's up 3 and this one's up 4. From 3 to 4 is only 1 unit. And then the width of this one, it said it is over 2, so this one's over 2. So if I did half of the base times its height, half of 2 is 1, times 1 is 1. They want the area of the whole thing. You're just adding those together and you'll get 13. 9 plus 1 is 10 plus 3 is 13. Number 50. 10 to go. The sum of 2 positive numbers is 151. And it said you have a lesser number and a greater number. So I'm going to do a lesser number and a greater number. And for me, I'm going to call the lesser one, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to read further. The lesser number is 19 more than the square root of the greater number. So if my greater number is x, my greater number is x. My lesser number is 19 more, so 19 plus the square root of the greater number, so 19 plus the square root of x. And it said the sum, if I read the first thing, it said the sum of them, if I took x plus 19 plus root x, if I add them together, is 151. So I need to get it equal to 0, and I need to factor it. Now, how do you know that that's what you're supposed to do when you stare at this problem? And that's the hard part, is how do you know that? Well, I'll show you in 1 second. I'm going to subtract it over first, and I'm going to write it in the correct order. So this is x plus root x. And then 19 minus 151. 19 minus 151 is negative 132. So that gives me this. So this is what is called a quadratic equation. And I know a quadratic, we always taught you, was something squared. But I agree if I had x squared minus x minus 6, which has nothing to do with this problem, but hopefully it'll help you understand something. If I'm factoring that, I got x minus 3 and x plus 2 because x times x was x squared and negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1 and they multiplied to negative 6. And you guys have factored enough doing these that you should understand how that came to be. What you didn't pay attention to is whatever my middle term was is always the first thing in my parentheses, is always the first thing. For example, if I did a different one, if I had x to the 4th minus x minus 12, x squared, I'm going to end up with x squared, and then I'd have a minus 4 and a plus 3, because those two would give me a negative 1, and they'd multiply to a negative 12. And that would multiply out to x to the 4th and give me an x squared. And notice again that whatever the middle number is what goes right here. Now you are only allowed to factor if your first power is double your second. So if I'm looking at the red equation that I did up here, my first power is 2 and my second one is 1. Well, if I double the 1, I get 2. So first power is doubled the second. If I looked down here on the green one, I had a 4 and a 2. For my first power is 4, my second one was 2. And my first power is double my second. If my first power is double my second, it's always a quadratic and I can always factor. So, or not always factor, depends on my number, but I can at least use the quadratic formula if it doesn't factor. I can always solve it. So if I'm looking at the blue one, which is the equation we have over here, so to get back to what we're supposed to be doing, I'm going to write it in a little different format. X to the first, a square root of x is x to the half. And so if I was looking at that problem, if I double my second one, if I double half, do I get 1? If I double a half and get 1, then I can say, yes, it factors. So I know I need a factor. So I'm going to come over here and factor it. And I know whatever my middle term is always goes first. So this is a square root. So I'm putting square root of x here and a square root of x here. I check it and see if it's making sense in my head. I multiply them. Square root of x times square root of x is x. And that was what my first term is. And so it worked. So then I just look at my last term, which is 132. And I say, what are the factors of 132 that will give me a 1, because there's a 1 in front of that root x. And so I write down my factors of 132, which are 1 and 32, 2 and 66. There's a lot that goes in here. 3 will go into that, whatever it does. 132 divided by 3, my brain doesn't want to think that one through, is 44. So 3 and 34. 4 will go into that certain number of times, so you're going to have 132 divided by 4, and it gives you 33. And I know some of you guys already know it instantly just looking at it, and that's okay. I'm trying to do it for those that don't know what they're doing. 132 divided by 6 gives me 22. 7 doesn't go into it. 8 does, so 8 will go into 132 divided by 8, which is 6. Oh, 8 does not. 132 divided by 9 is no. You do 132 divided by 10, and then you do 132 divided by 11, and then you'd stop because you know that's 11 and 12, and you've already reached the other numbers, so you're going to have 11 and a 12, because the next number you do is 12. And you've already got it. So once you hit those two numbers, you're okay. But you're trying to find a number that adds to 1, adds or subtracts to 1, and the only one that does is this 11 and 12. And so you're sticking them in here, 11 and 12. And I need a positive one, so it's plus 12 and minus 1. If I FOIL that out, I'm going to get back to where I started, and you're welcome to FOIL it. But if you set these to 0, because I need to solve these, I would do square root of x minus 11 is 0. Add 11 to the other side, And then you'd have to square both sides to get x by itself, and you would get x equals 121. And then if I did this one over here, I do square root of x plus 12 is 0. I subtract 12, and I'm going to get square root of x is negative 12. And a square root can never equal a negative number. And so this one doesn't work. So I know my x is 121. They did not ask me to find x, but I need to know it, or I can't do the problem. So when we come back up here and it says, what is the value of the greater number minus the lesser number? Well, I know my greater number was 121 because that was x. So I know this one's 121, and I know this one is 19 plus the square root of 121. And 19 plus 11 is 30. The square root of 121 is 11. 19 plus 11 is 30. And we wanted the greater number minus the lesser number. So 121 minus 30. The biggest number minus the smallest one. And that gives us 91. And my answer should have been J, which is 50. And that one gets a lot of people because they don't know how to factor when you have a square root. Hopefully that made sense doing it the other two problems off to the side. So good luck on those. Okay, 51. The list of numbers 41, 35, 30, x, y, and 15 has a median of 25. The mode of the list of numbers is 15. Well, if you remember mode, that means that's the one that occurs the most. And so I know 15 has to occur more than once. And so I'm going to say 15 at least has to occur twice. So one of these numbers, the x or y, has to be 15. It doesn't matter which one. But to have a mode, it has to occur more than once. It's the one that is most common. You're going to want to write them in order from smallest to biggest. So I'm going to have a 15, I'm going to have a 15, and I'm going to have an x, which I don't know what it is, and I don't know where to stick it, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to have some x. I've got a 25, I have got a 30, I've got a 35, and I've got a 41. And all I did is write every single number in order from smallest to biggest. So it says it has a median of 25. So median is the middle. So if I cross them off and go to the middle, one on the left and one on the right cross off. So then I cross off my next numbers, one on the left and one on the right crosses off. And then I need to cross off my next two numbers, right? So my next two numbers is going to be, to get my median to be 25, it has to be a number right here so that these can cross off. So that my median is 25, so that the middle is 25. So I know my x is right here. This x is right there. And it says, what is the mean of the list? Okay, I made a mistake on that one, but I see my mistake, so I'm starting over. So I put 25 in my list, and 25 is not in my list. It's not a number in my list at all, so I needed to leave it out. So it says the list of numbers 41, 35, 30, 15, 15, and x have to be in this list. And so again, I'm going to find my median is 25. So the one on the left and one on the right have to cancel. One on the left and one on the right have to cancel. And my median is my middle. Well, if I have two numbers here, which I do, because I still have this x that's not written anywhere, so I have an x right here. These two numbers have to average to my median. So I need to know what number, if I average these, is going to give me 25, or x plus 30 over 2, because that's my average, has to be 25. And so then I'm going to solve that. So I'm going to get x plus 30 is 50, because I times both sides by 2. And then I'm going to minus the 30 over, and it's going to tell me my x is 20. So this number right here had to be 20. That's not what they asked me to find, but I need to find it first before I can go on. And then they said, what is the mean of the list? Well, mean is average, which means you add them all together and divide by how many numbers you have. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to be dividing by 6. So I'm going to do 15 plus 15 plus 20 plus 30 plus 35 plus 41 divided by 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just throwing that in my calculator. So I'm going to have 15 plus 15 plus 20 plus can't remember the numbers, so I have to look them up really quick. Plus 30, plus 35, plus 41. Get an answer to that, and then divide that by 6, because you should have 6 numbers. It'll give you your mean or your average. And so my average should be C. Okay, number 52. It says, you are given the following system of equations where r, s, and t are integers. For which of the following will there be more than one xy solution with real number coordinates for the system? So ask for more than one solution. Well, when we have learned how to do anything with quadratics, which we have something which is x squared, they gave us an x squared right there. Anytime you have an x squared and you want to know the number of solutions, you can only have 0 solutions, 1 solution, or 2 solutions. And the way we found this is with the quadratic formula, but only part of it. So the quadratic formula was negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And when we were looking at that quadratic formula, we're only going to be looking at this piece that's in green. The piece that's in green is called the discriminant. This is the discriminant. If the discriminant is negative, or what is underneath that radical is negative, if we have a negative discriminant, then we have 0 solutions. Because if I square root a negative, I'm going to get an imaginary number. And imaginaries aren't on our number line, so that means there are no solutions if we have a square root of a negative. If I have a square root of a positive number, if my discriminant is positive, then I'm going to have 2 solutions. And the reason I get 2 is because of the plus or minus in front. Because I'm going to have a positive square root of it and a negative square root of it, which means I'm going to have 2 different solutions. And then I'm going to get 1 solution if my discriminant is the number 0. Because the square root of 0 is 0, and if you add or subtract 0, it's gone, and all you're left with is b over 2a. So it's going to give you 1 solution. And so when I read this problem and it says I want more than 1 solution, my only option is to have 2 solutions, or is make my discriminant positive. So this is how we do it. We use substitution. It says y equals x squared. I'm going to take that x squared and I'm going to stick it right down there and for that y. And it will read rx plus s, and my s's look like 5s, I'm really sorry, x squared equals t. I'm going to get it equal to 0, because then I can use quadratic formula if it's equal to 0. And I'm going to write it in the right order, highest power to lowest power. So I'm going to have an sx squared plus rx minus t equals 0. So I'm getting it in quadratic form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then I'm doing the discriminant now. So I'm doing what's in green right over here, that b squared minus 4ac. I don't need the radical. I don't need the square root part. I just need to do b squared minus 4ac. As all I'm doing is b squared minus 4ac. My b is the letter r. So it's r squared minus 4 times a, and my a is the s, times c, which is negative t. And a negative times a negative is positive, so I'm going to simplify that down to r squared plus 4st. That's my discriminant. If I want more than 1 solution, which means I want 2 solutions, I look over here. If I want 2 solutions, it must be positive. All positive numbers are bigger than 0. That's what we're looking for. R squared plus 4st is greater than 0. Because it has to be positive to give me 2 solutions. If they asked me to have no solutions, I would have had this being less than 0, because then it would be negative, and a negative is no solutions. Okay? That one is a hard problem. And we did discriminants in math too, but it was one day, and you didn't go back and you review them or anything, and so most people forget the word discriminant, but that's where it all came from, is quadratic formula. Number 53, the third and fourth term, so 1, 2, 3, 4, the third and fourth term of an arithmetic sequence are 13 and 18 respectively. What is the 50th term of that sequence? So I went back and found my first. Arithmetic means you're adding between terms. So 13 plus what was 18? And you would say I added 5 to get my next term. So I'm going to subtract 5 going backwards, subtract 5, and it gives me my first term was 3. If you know the formula for arithmetic sequence, it's a sub n equals a sub 1 plus n minus 1 times your difference. And all we're going to do is throw them in. They wanted the 50th term, so you're putting 50 in for all n's. So you're going to say a sub 50 is equal to my first term, which is 3, plus n, which is 50, minus 1 times my difference. Well, I added 5 each time, so my difference was 5. You throw it in a calculator and you'd have your answer. You'd have a sub 50 is equal to 3 plus 50 minus 1, which is 49 times 5. So I would go to my calculator and do 3 plus 49 times 5 and say it's 248. Or my 50th term was 248, which is letter A. Okay, number 54. It says one of the following graphs in the standard xy coordinate plane is the graph of y equals sine squared x plus cosine squared over the domain of negative pi halves to pi halves, and which one is it? Two ways to do this, and it depends how much of your trig you remember. If you remember your Pythagorean identities that you should know, and Math 2 Honors did it, and Math 3 does it. All Math 3 does it. So sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x is a Pythagorean identity that equals 1. So if you know sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x, this is the same thing as 1. You're just finding a line that says y equals 1, and that's h. That's a line at 1. That's if you know that. If you do not know that, let's say you've never learned it or you have forgotten it, all you really have to do is throw it in a calculator. You'd go over to your calculator and you're going to plug in sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. So you're going to come here and you're going to go sine of x squared, which most people don't know how to enter in your calculator, plus cosine squared of x. I need to go back and put a parenthesis in front of that. Cosine of x squared, and we want to graph it. It said to graph it from pi halves to pi halves or something, negative pi halves to positive pi halves. So I would go to my window and I'd say I want to graph it from negative, and I type it in just like they said, negative pi divided by 2. Your calculator will change it to a decimal, and you want to go to a positive pi divided by 2. And the only other thing you'd have to know is to graph sines, cosines, tangents, any of your trig functions, you have to be in radians. So you'd go to your mode, make sure your calculator is in radians, and then you'd just graph. And it will draw you the picture, and you say, which picture is it? And you match it. And it would have been the letter, whatever that is, H on there. Be the letter H. So you can either know the formula, but if you don't know the formula, they gave you everything and just said graph it. All you really have to do is throw it in a calculator and graph it, if you know how to throw it in a calculator. Okay, number 55. Number 55 said, what is the period of this function? Cosecants, their period is negative b over 2a. That's vertex. Period is 2 pi over b. That's my period. And if you don't know what the b is, you would have a cosecant of bx plus c plus d. That's the standard form of that equation over here. That's what that equation is. The b is always what's in front of your x. Well, the b is in front of x here. The b is going to be, in our case, 4. So it's 2 pi over 4. And you can reduce that. 2 and 4 reduce. It'll go into itself once and twice, and you're going to get pi halves, which is e. So again, not a hard problem. It's do you know the formula for the trig function? The period is 2 pi over b, or 2 pi over 4. Number 56. It says, at the school carnival, Mike will play a game in which he will toss a penny, a nickel, and a dime at the same time. He'll be awarded 3 points for each coin that lands with heads face up. Let the random variable x represent the total number of points awarded on any toss of the coin. What is the expected value of x? So the first thing you'd have to do is actually set up your sample space. You're going to flip 3 coins. You're either going to get heads, tails on either coin. You're always going to get heads or a tails. So we don't care if it's a penny or a nickel or a dime. It doesn't really matter. You're just going to care if it's heads or tails. So if you flip your 3 coins, you could get tails, 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 all 3 of them tails. You could get a tails, heads, tails. You get a tails, heads, heads. You could get a tails, tails, heads. You could also get a heads, tails, tails, a heads, tails, heads, a heads, 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 and a heads, heads, tails. There's only 8 possible ways to do that. If you don't know how, if you don't know if your sample space is correct, realize that for your first coin, you could only get heads or tails or 2 different things. For your second coin, you can only get heads or tails or 2 different things. And your third coin, you get 2. If you times those, you will get 8, which means you know there are 8 possibilities. Or over here, I have 8 possibilities. So that's how I know my sample space is complete or done and I didn't miss any of them. So then it says you'll be awarded 3 points for each coin that lands with heads face up. So on our first one, we had 3 tails, so we get 0 points. We only get 3 points per head. Our second one, we have a head, so we get 3 points. Our next one, we have 2 heads, so 3 points each. You get 6 points on that one. Our next one down, you get 3 points because we have 1 head. On the second column, you have 1 head, so that's 3 points. The next one down, you have 2 heads, so that's 6 points, 3 for each one. The next one down, you have 3 heads, so you get 3, 6, 9 points. And your last one, you have 2 heads, which is 6 points. So to do this problem, it says let the random variable x represent the total number of points awarded on any toss of coin. What is the expected value of x? We're going to add up all of our points and see what we get and divide it by how many options there were. There were 8 outcomes. So you're going to do 0 plus 3. I'll write it 0 plus 3 plus 6 plus 3 plus 3 plus 6 plus 9 plus 6. I added up all these little things I'm putting little bullets by. I'm adding up all my points. So this is going to be 12 on this side, 15, 21, 36. So I get a total of 36 points. But there's 8 different ways to get it because there's 8 items in my sample space. So I have to divide that by 8. And so if I have 36, I divide it by 8. 4 goes into both of those. 4 will go into 36 9 times, and 4 will go into 8 twice, and I will get 9 halves for my expected value of x. How many points I should be getting? Somewhere around 4.5, which you can't get 0.5 when you throw it, but you know, when you throw a coin. But that's your expected value. Okay, 57. For what positive real values of k, if any, is the determinant of the matrix k4, 3k equal to k? Note the determinant is this. So they tell you the formula for determinant. So you didn't even have to remember it. Determinant, you multiply down, a times d, and you always subtract multiplying up, b times c. That's why they give you ad minus bc. So you're going to multiply down. So k times k is k squared. You always subtract, multiplying up, 3 times 4, which is 12. And they told you that was equal to k. This is a quadratic. It's something squared, so you're just going to get it all on one side and factor. So you're going to subtract k to the left. So subtract k to the other side of the equation, and you get the quadratic equal to 0. Factor it. So you're going to have k and k. What multiplies to 12 that adds to 1 would be 4 and 3. will multiply to 12, and they can subtract to 1. I need a -4 and a +3. That was equal to 0, so you're going to set each piece equal to 0. So k minus 4 equals 0, give me 4. K plus 3 equals 0, gives me -3. And we were asked to find a positive real value for k. This part up here says we want only the positive. So they only want the 4. My answer is B. Okay, 58. So 58 said, given a positive integer n such that I to the n equals 1, which of the following statements about n must be true? So if we did all of our i's, you don't have to do very many, but you'll understand what we're doing. I is the square root of -1. If I square that and write I squared, I'm going to get -1. If I did I cubed is, I'm going to write it over here. I cubed is I squared times I. But we know I squared is -1, so -1 times I is -I. And if I do I to the 4th, I'm going to write in green, I to the 4th is equal to I squared times I squared, which is -1 times -1, which is a +1. And if I do I to the 5th, I'm going to get rid of this for a second and say I to the 5th is equal to I to the 4th times I, because that's I to the 5th. I to the 4th we already know. It was a +1, and 1 times I is I. If I did, I'm going to do one more and then I'm going to stop. I to the 6th. I to the 6th would be I to the 5th times I. That's I to the 6th. I to the 5th is I, and I times I is I squared, and I squared is -1. And what you should notice is that it's always rotating. So you're only going to have 4 values. I'm going to have -1, -I, +1, +I. And then it's going to repeat. If I kept going, I'm going to have -1, -I, +1, +I. And those 4 values repeat over and over and over in the same exact order. Doesn't matter how far you go, I to the 112th, it's still going to have that same pattern all the way through. So the question was, which of the following statements about n must be true if we want I to the n to equal 1? So we want our I to what power is equal to 1, a +1. And the only place we've done it is right here, right? But we could keep going. I mean, if I did I to the 7th and I to the 8th, I to the 7th, so we got to I, then we're at -1, so our next one is -I, and our next one is +1, and we would have said it would have been right here. And we could keep going and going and going. So we're going to say it's going to happen when it's I to the 4th, I to the 8th, our next one would be I to the 12th, because it's every 4th number, I to the 16th. So it's when n is divided by 4, the remainder has to be 0 because it's repeating every 4th number. And we want our remainder to be 0 because you would be dividing by 4. If you have any kind of remainder, then it's messed up. And yes, it can be determined from the information they gave us. If you know that those numbers are always repeating over and over and over, those 4 numbers, they just keep repeating, 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 repeating down. Okay, 59. 4, -pi halves is less than or equal to 0 is less than or equal to pi halves. So they gave you, if you know your unit circle, they said that you're on your unit circle, you're only between -pi halves and +pi halves. Well, -pi halves is right here, +pi halves is right here. So they're saying only the numbers on this side, on the right side of your unit circle. They said, where is our absolute value of sine greater than or equal to 1? So where's our sine 1 or -1 is what it's asking. And sine is our y value. And right here, we're over 0 up 1. And right here, we're over 0 down 1. And both of those, the absolute value of the y, because this is your x and your y, and this is your x and your y. So you have a 1 and a -1. They both happen at -pi halves and at positive pi halves, because this is negative pi halves on my circle, this is positive pi halves on my circle, so that's where they both are, the absolute value of them are 1. That's if you know your unit circle. If you don't know your unit circle on that one, I don't have a good way to do it. So that's how you approach it. Good luck on that one if you don't have it. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, 60. It says ray PK bisects LPM. So I'm going to draw LPM, and I don't know how big or small it is, and I don't care. All I care is it's an angle. So I'm going to have an LPM. That's that angle. And the ray PK bisects it. That means from P to K, bisected the angle or made this 2 equal pieces. Because it said ray PK bisects angle LPM. It says the measure of LPM is 11x. So LPM, this whole big thing, is 11x. And the measure of LPK is 4x plus 18. So this little one right here is 4x plus 18. What is the measure of KPM? So if I know these two angles are the exact same measure, because PK bisected my angle, so I know that these two guys right here are the same, this one has to be 4x plus 18 as well. I have no option because they were cut in half. They have to be equal. So if I know the whole big thing is 11x, I'm using angle bisector theorem, or the angle addition postulate, which says if I add 2 angles, I get the big angle. So if I take my 4x plus 18 and I add it to another 4x plus 18, it better equal 11x. If I add my 2 small angles, I get the whole big angle, because they would be equivalent to each other. And then we just solve it. 4x and 4x is 8x. 18 and 18 is 36. So if I subtract 8x over here, I'm going to get 36 is 3x, or x is 12. And that's not what they asked us to find, but we need to find it to get to where they want. That gives us x is 12. It says, what is the measure of KPM? So they asked us to find just this one little red angle right here. So that angle is 4x plus 18, which is 4 times 12 plus 18, because I knew my x was 12 and I plugged it in. So I do 4 times 12, which is 48, plus 18. Is that 66? And so my answer should be the letter K. And that is the entire practice test. Good luck on your ACT in a few weeks.